Welcome to the pre-arrival orientation session. My name is Luciano. This session is intended for people who are expecting to receive refugee families and they have received the notification of travel from Immigration Canada. This session is therefore intended to assist you to prepare as you expect to welcome your refugee family in Canada. I will be going through a number of areas to help you organize yourself as you expect to receive your family in Canada. First, I will speak about communication before the refugee arrives to Canada, as well as during the time of arrival in Canada. I will also speak about the airport procedures that you can expect at the airport once the refugee arrives. I will also speak to the various tasks and responsibilities as the sponsor of the refugee, will need to organize yourself, including updating any contacts, personnel, resources that will be needed in ensuring that you are prepared to receive the refugee that you are welcoming. I will also speak in more details about those responsibilities and outlining some of the most important tasks that need to be undertaken immediately after the refugee has arrived in Canada. I will also share with you some information about resources that ORAT has developed to assist you, especially the co-sponsors of the refugee, as well as church groups that are involved in helping in settling some of the refugees identified by the Office for Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto. I will also provide you some information about samples of some of the most important documents that you need to help your refugee to obtain or to apply for upon arrival in Canada. So let's get started. First, it's very, very important that when you have your refugee in process while overseas, that you keep regular communication with the refugees so that you know what's going on with their process, as well as also ensuring that the refugee is able to provide you any updates about their sponsorship process. Therefore, it's important that the refugee either communicates with you, the uh, the church group that is sponsoring the refugee, as well as our office, with regard to any information that they receive, whether it is from the Canadian Visa Office or if it is from the International Organization for Migration, IOM, or from the UNHCR office regarding their file. Now, it's important to also recognize that some refugees may not necessarily have the language abilities to communicate in the language that is official in Canada, whether it's English or French. Therefore, once you become aware about that, we would ask that you make arrangements to provide an interpreter to facilitate communication with the refugee. That may also be the case at the time when they arrive at the airport, that you have with you a translator who can assist in interpreting or in translating the language that the refugee speaks, so that you are able to assist the refugee well. We ask that during this time, once you have received the notification of travel from Immigration Canada, or what we call as the NAT, NAT, that you begin to prepare your refugee while they are still overseas by providing them some key important information that they need to be aware about um, while they prepare to travel to Canada. And part of this information that you communicate with them will include things like explaining about uh, what to expect on the day when they're traveling, what to pack, um, tell them about the kind of weather they can expect depending on the period of the year when they arrive in Canada or the season. Explain to them also about some of the things, including the people, the culture, language, and so on and so forth. That's really, really important. Now, it's a common thing for refugees to be anxious when or before they travel, especially when it comes to things to do with the weather. Please prepare the refugees by ensuring they understand that the Canadian weather, though, is sometimes very extreme, that the infrastructure here has been well prepared and designed to deal with those conditions. Therefore, it should not be of any concern to them, particularly if the refugees arriving at a time when we have cold winter weather, that the infrastructure here is well designed to keep people warm, whether it is the houses, which definitely have heating to ensure that there's warmth in the house, whether it's schools or shopping or public transportation, all these facilities are well heated and therefore insulated from the elements of the weather. And also that the newcomers will be provided warm clothing to ensure that they are well insulated from the elements. And so these are things to share and communicate with the newcomers or with the refugees before they travel so that they are not anxious. And if in any situation they are able to acquire a warm winter clothing before travel, they could do so. But obviously, it's important to assure them that these things will be provided to them upon arrival. It's also important to ask the refugees to bring with them all their official government issued documents to Canada. This is critical because um, these original documents will be needed um, at various points during their time in Canada as they begin to apply to obtain different government documents. Some of these include birth certificates, passports, any academic diplomas or degrees or transcripts from the institutions that they have attended. We would encourage them to bring all of those, especially the originals, with them if they have them in their possession, because it is easier to come with them rather than to request them later after the refugees has arrived in Canada, which may be challenging to obtain that information. So that is something that would encourage that you explain and communicate very clearly to the newcomer so that they have that information beforehand before traveling to Canada. Additionally, and also very, very important, we would ask that you communicate to the refugees and provide them the phone number and the mailing address of the sponsor, whether it is the relative of the refugee or if it is a refugee being sponsored by the church community. We would ask that you provide the refugee with a phone number of the person who is picking them at the airport, as well as the Canadian mailing address in advance of the refugee traveling to Canada. This will be needed at the point of entry at the airport by the immigration officer who will be processing their landing papers to ensure that the newcomer's permanent resident card will be mailed to the Canadian address that they will have provided at the airport. So we would ask that if and when you have made arrangements for a place where the newcomer will stay, that you provide that information. However, in the event that you do not have a permanent place yet, we would ask that the co-sponsor, that is the relative of the refugee or the sponsoring group or church community, provide their mailing address, their home mailing address to the refugee so that they have an address to provide to the immigration officer at the airport upon arrival. This will ensure that the permanent resident card is mailed in a timely way to the newcomer. As well, also it will prevent any further delays from their permanent resident card being processed by the immigration department responsible. For groups or church communities that are sponsoring refugees through Project Hope, we would ask that if in the event that you have not yet secured a place for the newcomer who is arriving, that you provide the church address as the mailing address for the newcomer to provide to the immigration officer at the airport. That way, their permanent resident card can be sent to the parish, and the church will be able to provide it to the newcomers once they have a permanent place. Additionally, once this is done, and once the newcomer has arrived, we would ask that you, as the sponsor of the newcomer, update the newcomer's mailing address online on the website of Immigration Canada so that their address is current with Immigration Canada, as well also in the event that any information needs to be sent to them, that it's accessible to the government. There are other things that you can also discuss or communicate with a newcomer, as noted in the presentation, including how much items to bring with them, with the luggage that the newcomers will be packing, since they are packing any and everything that they need for the rest of their life. They are not going to be going back. Therefore, communicate very clearly with the newcomer to ensure that they are aware how much they can bring with them. Obviously, on the flights, they may be limited in terms of the amount of luggage they can carry. Some airlines may limit only to 2 check-in luggage plus one carry-on and other additional handbag. However, the weight could be also limiting. Therefore, it's important that the newcomers know how much they can bring with them, and to communicate that to their sponsors so that the sponsors know how many vehicles to take to the airport for picking up the newcomers if they have brought with them a lot of luggage, as well also to ensure that the newcomers do not miss out on bringing what's important to them. So these are some of the things that you would need to communicate very, very clearly in advance of the newcomers' arrival to Canada so that they can prepare themselves well. Additionally, it's critical also that the sponsors, in this case, either the relative of the refugee or the church group that is sponsoring the refugee, along with the volunteers, meet if they have not met in some time, and begin to re-engage the volunteers that are going to be assisting with the settlement of the refugee. And they would need to begin to review the settlement plan, which was prepared and submitted to Immigration Canada in preparation to welcome the refugee, and ensure that all the tasks that are assigned, that are listed, are assigned to various volunteers within the sponsor group, or those who are going to be engaged in journeying with the refugee upon arrival. It's also important, given that the process of waiting for the refugees application to be finalized takes time, that the sponsor and the group that is preparing to welcome them review their budget to ensure that the financial arrangements that have been put in place in the budget are in line with some of the needs, existing needs in the community where the refugee is going to settle. Cost of living may have gone up, so there may be adjustments that may have to be done in the budget. So these are all important things that the sponsor need to do as part of their pre-arrival preparations to welcome and receive the refugee. Once the budget and the settlement plan has been updated by the group, we would ask that you keep that on file so that it is the document that will follow once the refugee arrives, in ensuring that their needs are being met and provided for. Also, we would encourage that, of course, in the case of church groups that are sponsoring refugees who are not related to them, who are strangers, or those that are provided by through Project Hope, that volunteers are assigned clear tasks and responsibilities which they need to undertake during the initial period of the refugees' arrival, so that each volunteer knows what to do. Additionally, given that time may have passed from the time when initially the group was formed before the refugee arrives, that some people may have ended their commitment and new volunteers may have come on board. So therefore, we would ask that you update the contact information for all the volunteers who are active and provide that information to the Office for Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto, so that we have the most current information of the volunteers who are going to be engaged in settling the refugee. Additionally, the Office for Refugees, ORAT, also undertakes various opportunities to provide training and information for the various volunteers so that they know what to do in the event that they are preparing to receive their refugee. As well, we would ask that they register and attend these sessions. Also, the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program, RSTP, provides training to volunteers of sponsor groups to assist them to understand their responsibilities and the obligations that are involved in settling a refugee. So we would ask that they participate in these sessions as well. For constituent groups or CGs that are settling Project Hope refugee families or cases, we ask that the church group provides our office, the Office for Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto, most current or an up-to-date police background check. Since we are dealing with refugees, which are a vulnerable group of people, it's important that the volunteers who are involved in settling the refugees have undergone a police background screening to ensure that they are eligible to be involved in helping this vulnerable group of people. Therefore, we would need that police screening report so that we have it on file at our office. Usually, the police criminal record report is for a period of 5 years, and it's kept on file for the duration that it is required for the volunteer involved. So all the volunteers from our church groups that are involved in settling refugee families are required to provide a police background report so that that can be kept on file. If that has not been done, we would encourage that you go forward and invite those volunteers to undertake that process. Additional also, when the notification of arrival has been received from Immigration Canada, the Office for Refugees also sends what we call as a sponsor task list to the sponsor who is responsible for welcoming and receiving the refugee, which task list outlines the various important tasks that need to be done immediately upon the arrival of the refugee. And we would ask that the sponsor follow through with that task list to ensure that those items listed are fulfilled. I will speak about this in the subsequent slides that follow, so that you can see what sort of tasks need to be done or performed during the time that the refugee has arrived. Once these tasks have been completed, we ask that you forward the completed task list to our office at the email or at outreach@archtoronto.org, or at outreach@archtoronto.org is the email that you would need to send the completed task list so that we have that task list document on file. Now, additional also, for the groups that are settling Project Hope cases, we require that the budget that is intended for the refugee being settled will be updated regularly to include the actual expenses that are being provided to the newcomer, especially in the second install, when the group receives their second installment check to support the family that they are settling through Project Hope. We also ask that the sponsors arrange to bring the refugee or the newcomer upon arrival to attend their welcome orientation at our office. This is especially for refugees that are sponsored through Project Hope. We would need to meet them in person to ensure that we can communicate some of these things directly to them and ensure that they know exactly what to expect from their sponsors. And for all the other refugees that are being settled by their relatives or friends, we would ask also that they attend the welcome orientation session, which is a mandatory session for all refugees that are sponsored through the Office for Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto. This is very important, and this is communicated in the notification of travel email that is sent to you by our office immediately once we become aware that Immigration Canada has scheduled your refugee to travel to come to Canada. Now, let's talk about what to expect at the airport at the time of arrival. When the refugee is ready to travel or on the day of travel, they will arrive at the point of entry. And at the time when they arrive, which details would have already been communicated to you by our office in what we call as the Notice of Arrival Transmission, NAT. Those details will include the flight number, the time of departure, any details regarding transit points if they have a stopover somewhere to transit before final arriving in Canada, as well as the final destination and the time when they will arrive and the date. Now we would ask that you print a copy of that notice of arrival transmission or the NAT and take it with you. The person who will be going to the airport to pick the refugee, to take it with you to the airport so that you have these details with you at hand. Sometimes there could be flight delays or cancellation of the flight. If that situation happens, these will usually be communicated to you in real time so that you are aware of what is happening. However, also, you have the opportunity to be able to track the flight of the newcomer, as there is a link for the Greater Toronto Airport authorities, where you can track the various flights that are coming into the country and when they would land. And if there's any cancellation or delays, you would be aware about that. At the point of entry in Toronto Pearson International Airport, the Polycultural Immigrant and Community Services, or what we call as PICS, is the main service provider, which has been designated by Immigration Canada to provide assistance and support to all arriving immigrants and refugees at the transit point. So this is where the refugees, upon arrival, they would be um, undergoing their landing process in the transit area, um, whereby the representatives of the Polycultural Immigrant Community Services would be there to guide and assist the refugees, whether it's by providing maybe language translations or helping them to complete certain documents that they need to do, so that their process of landing goes smoothly in the transit area. By the time that these representatives of the Polycultural Immigrant and Community Services bring your refugee to meet you outside at the arrival area, they would have already assisted the refugee to complete all the necessary landing processes with the immigration officer and the customs. And that way, all you have to do is go and wait at a designated point, which would be you would be advised by the representatives of the Polycultural Immigrant Community Services at the waiting area of the arrivals. Um, Depending on which terminal the flight is arriving at, that is where you have to go to wait and receive your refugee. Obviously, be aware that different situations can occur, especially on a given day. As you head to the airport, there could be traffic, there could be changes in weather conditions, or you could have a hard time finding parking. So be prepared for all sorts of eventualities as you prepare to go and receive your refugee on the day that they are arriving. Again, just as a reminder, don't forget to provide in advance a mailing address to your refugee, as well as the phone number of the person who will be going to the airport to pick the refugee, so that if there is need to contact the person for whatever reason, that the refugee can provide that number to the officer um, in the airport to be able to reach you who is picking the refugee at the airport. Once the refugee has completed all their landing processes and so on, and then the representative of PICS, or the Polycultural Immigrant and Community Services, will bring the newcomer out to the waiting representatives of either the church group or their relatives who sponsor them. And then you are expected to sign a document which confirms that the refugee has been handed over to you. You'll be asked to provide your name, phone number, mailing address, and the group that you represent on that form. So make sure that you do that before you you live with your refugee once they have been brought to you by the representatives of TICS at the airport. Okay. And then after that, of course, aware that the refugees would have been very tired after a long flight. Please make sure that you, after you have taken maybe a few pictures with their consent, of course, um, take them straight to wherever you have parked your car, pack their luggage and take them home so that they can go and get some rest. Of course, you would have made necessary arrangements in terms of welcoming them at their place where they're going to stay, whether it's temporary or their permanent place, with all kinds of things, including food, drinks, and other things, so that they can settle in, and give them time to settle in before you can begin to engage them to begin to take them to different government services to apply for different documents that they will need in the days and weeks ahead. Okay. Now, here are some of the things that I mentioned that the sponsor will need to accomplish within at least the first 2 months, which are listed in the co-sponsor task list. Or the sponsor task list. Some of these include assisting the newcomers to apply for the relevant government issued documents, including their Ontario Health Insurance Plan, the interim federal health plan, which is issued at the airport. Fortunately, you will not need to apply for that. A social insurance number, which you will need to take them to Service Ontario to apply for. The permanent resident card that would be mailed eventually once the mailing address has been provided by the refugee to the immigration officer on the day of their arrival. So that one you don't need to do anything. But if in the event that an address was not provided, then we would ask that you immediately go online and update the Canadian mailing address of the newcomer so that they can receive their permanent resident card in a timely way and at the correct address. Also, soon after, probably you would need to make arrangements to go and help the newcomers to open a bank account so that their funds or money to help them buy their needs can be deposited, or if a check has been issued by our office, so that that check can be deposited in their bank account. Also provide the newcomers with a contact number which they can reach you in case if they need to touch base with you. Maybe they have a question or they have some things that they need to know so that they can connect with you, and help them also to understand how to use the 911 emergency number in case there's an emergency that they need to deal with immediately upon arrival. It's not uncommon that sometimes when refugees arrive, some of them may immediately become sick or ill, and may need to see a doctor or be taken to the hospital, to the emergency room. So it's important that you show them how to use the 911 emergency number so that they know what to do in the event that that happens. Of course, we would assume that you have made arrangements for either temporary or permanent housing where the refugees will go and stay. Additionally, also in the days and weeks ahead, would ask that you begin to help the refugees or the newcomers to find a family doctor or dentist, so that if they need to see a health care worker to deal with any medical issues, they can be able to do so. It's very, very important that also you take the newcomers to be registered with a settlement agency. These settlement agencies are government funded service providers that look after the needs of newly arrived immigrants, including refugees, so that they have access to services, things like language classes or training if they have difficulty with language, helping them with employment, job counseling, resume writing, and also having an assessment of generally any kind of needs that they might have. So it's important that you assist them to be registered immediately with a settlement agency, so that they can have access to these services provided to them, or they can be referred to where to access some of these services. Um, Additional also, would ask that you arrange to bring the newcomer for welcome orientation to our office, or to attend the welcome orientation, which is provided virtually, so that we can explain some of these supports that they can expect, as well as also to go through over some of the rules and the guidelines and the policies regarding refugees that are sponsored through our office, and to help them to know where to find our office in the event that there is an emergency or they need to reach us, so we can assist them and support them in that way. So these are very, very important tasks to undertake and also to follow, and to document your work. Obviously, for those refugees that have children, it will be important to help them to arrange to have the children enrolled in school, especially if the school year, they arrive during the school year, to help the children to apply for the Canada Child Benefits, which is a government subsidy program to assist families to provide additional financial support for raising of their children, and to assist also those newcomers who are ready and eager to work, to apply for jobs, and so on and so forth. So all of these are very, 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 very important things that would ask you to continue to review and to work on as you go through with settling the newcomer during the initial first 2 months of their arrival in Canada. Now, there is a very important resource that our office has developed to assist you in going about fulfilling some of these tasks. We have developed two resources. One is called the CG Handbook, or what we call as the Constituency Group Handbook, as well as also the Sponsor Resource Toolbox. These two resources are developed specifically to assist you, the sponsor, whether it's an individual or it's a church group, so that you have a central pool of resources which you can be able to find to assist you in supporting your newcomer. These tools are available on our website, and they are accessible simply by clicking on the link that has been provided, and you'll be able to access this document, which you can download and save, or you can print and have a hard copy rather, to be able to look at. The Sponsor Resource Toolbox particularly is very, very helpful for any first-time sponsors who have not done refugee sponsorship before and do not know what to do. Whereby we have compiled a number of resources, including access to various government services in your community where you will be settling the refugee. And the document is PDF searchable. You can click on a specific topic and it will open directly to that topic, explaining to you exactly what resources are available, whether it is from food banks, libraries, service center, shopping malls, activities, and so on and so forth that are available within your area. Let me just show you briefly how you can access this document on our website. So if you go to our website, or ORAT's website, which is www.orat.ca, you click on that and you'll see that on the left-hand side of the tabs that are located, you will see a resource tab from the list. And if you click on the resources tab, you will see there's a list of um, different documents. The one that you are looking for is the Sponsor Resource Toolkit or the CG Handbook, which you can open, and it will assist you in ensuring that you have access to this resource to guide you and to assist you in your efforts in settling the newcomer that you are settling in your community. So very, very important that you make use of this resource, these two resources for you. Now, how do you access your financial resources that have been either deposited in trust with the Office for Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto to assist you to provide for the needs of your newcomer, or in the case of church groups that are sponsoring refugees that are financially supported directly by Project Hope, how you can be able to access the funds. For sponsors who are sponsoring their relatives or family members, the Office for Refugees, ORAT, will automatically issue checks on a quarterly basis immediately upon our receipt of the notice of arrival transmission. So once we receive the communication from Immigration Canada that your refugee is scheduled to arrive to Canada on a particular date, our office will begin to process the initial check for the refugee. The check will be issued directly to the refugee so that upon arrival they can be assisted to deposit it in their bank account and will be able to have access to funds to use for their day-to-day needs, including paying for food, transportation, rent, and many other things that they will need. However, for the sponsors who are receiving financial support directly from Project Hope, this is church groups or communities, the check will be issued, the initial check will be processed and issued directly to the church group, and the church group then will be responsible to issue those monthly checks to the refugee that they will be settling. For the checks that are issued to the groups that are receiving financial support from Project Hope, we ask that the group completes a budget, which includes also the actuals, especially during the second installment, when the second installment check is being processed for the Project Hope sponsor groups. We would ask that they complete their budget by inputting their actual expenses so that we know how much is being spent on different line items in the budget, and to be able to adjust that accordingly if the need arises for these church groups that are settling Project Hope cases. It's definitely very, very important also that for these Project Hope cases, for us to monitor the expenditures of these monies, because these are donated funds and we want to ensure that these monies are used in a prudent way. However, if the newcomer no longer needs the financial support because they have either become financially self-reliant because they have found a job or employment and are earning enough income to be able to support themselves, then the budget also has to be reviewed to reflect that, so that any allowable deductions can be made in line with what is allowable by Immigration Canada in those situations. Okay. Now, it's also important that before the refugee arrives, we would ask that the sponsors provide us their current mailing address so that we can be able to send the checks directly to that address. This is something that we strongly request be done because we do not want to issue checks and mail them to the wrong addresses, since most times the information we may have on file is outdated due to the long processing time for these refugee applications. And so by the time the refugee arrives, the information on file may not be current. So we would ask that as soon as the sponsor receives the notification of travel for their newcomer or for their refugee, that you provide us your current mailing address so that we can be able to process and send the checks to the correct mailing address. Just another reminder that all sponsored refugees um, are monitored by both Immigration Canada and our office to ensure that we are fulfilling our sponsorship obligations as outlined in the sponsorship undertaking and the settlement plan, but as well also to ensure that if there's any gaps lacking during the period of settlement, that we can be able to step in to provide for those gaps and ensure that the refugee is being well taken care of. Therefore, it's very, very important that the refugees that you are settling are aware that Immigration Canada may conduct random interviews using an online survey to monitor the progress of their settlement and to determine and establish whether they are receiving the supports that have been guaranteed to be provided to them during their year of settlement. It's not mandatory that they participate in these surveys. They have a choice. They can either participate in them or they can choose to decline their participation or involvement in these surveys. However, we do encourage them to review and see whether this is something that they have the time to do so, as it's very, very important. Now, if the newcomer chooses to participate in the survey conducted by Immigration Canada, whether it is sent online or using a phone call, we ask that you document your responses because any information that you provide to Immigration Canada will and can be used to determine whether the supports that you're receiving are adequate or not. And if it is found to be lacking, then Immigration Canada will trigger an investigation of your sponsor, and your sponsor will be required to provide evidence and proof of different documents to confirm that in fact they're providing the necessary support to the refugee. Therefore, we strongly encourage that you document all and every support that you provide to your newcomer. There should be no opportunity to provide cash money to the newcomers. All the funds that you provide to the newcomer should be using traceable methods. That is, you can either use checks, you can issue them checks, or you can use e-transfers, electronic transfers, bank transfers to the newcomer so that you have a paper trail of the money or the support that you're providing. In the event that you are providing items in kind, please make sure to document the list of all the in-kind items, whether it's furniture, clothing, household items, and estimate the value of those items. You can use a table that is available on our website to establish these in-kind items that you provide to the refugees so that we can ensure that in the event that we are asked to provide proof of things that have been provided to the newcomer, you have the documentation and the estimated values of those items that have been provided to be able to demonstrate to Immigration Canada that that support is provided. Newcomers also, as I indicated, are monitored by our office to ensure that their sponsors are fulfilling their responsibilities well. And we will be sending, after 2 months of the newcomer's arrival in Canada, a survey, what we call a newcomer survey, to the newcomer, asking them to complete that survey. And in that survey, we would be checking to see whether all the items listed on the task list have been fulfilled after a period of 2 months. Please, when the newcomer receives our survey, which is sent through SurveyMonkey, um, please complete it and send it. We will review the information, and if we find there are certain gaps or things which are still missing, we can assist and support you, the sponsor, in pointing you to where to be able to fulfill those services so that you can ensure that the newcomer has access to all the supports that they need during that time. Finally, I want to thank you again for taking this opportunity to prepare yourself to receive your refugee, and also to ensure that if and when you need guidance, you can contact our office and our staff will be available to assist and support you. Our email address is oratoutreach@archtoronto.org, which you can use to communicate with us to let us know as you prepare to receive your refugee family. Make sure to check in the notification of arrival document that would be sent to you the details of your refugees' arrival date, time, location, and also the sessions that we would be inviting them to attend after they have arrived. Okay, now I will show you a few samples of some of the important documents you will need to obtain for your refugee once they have arrived. First is the landing documents which are issued at the airport. So that one will be automatically provided to the newcomer, which confirms their status as permanent residents. Second will be the permanent resident card, which the newcomer will receive a few months after arrival in Canada. And obviously that one will be mailed to the address that they provide. And then we would ask also that you assist them in applying for the Ontario Health Insurance Plan card, which is OHIP. That's to help the newcomers to be able to access health services within Ontario. Very, very important. Um, for those sponsors who are settling refugees outside of the province of Ontario, you have also a provincial or territorial health insurance plan, which you can assist your newcomer to apply for to ensure that they receive access to health services covered by the province or the territory in which they are settling. Additional also, sponsored refugees receive um, a federal health insurance plan called the Interim Federal Health um, Program, which covers the refugees or the newcomers for a period of 1 year from the day they arrive in Canada. And that provides supplementary coverage for things like prescription drugs, eyeglasses, emergency dental care, part of which is not covered through your provincial health insurance plan or your territorial health insurance plan. So it's important that the newcomers are assisted to make use of that plan. And additionally, also help the newcomer to apply for a social insurance number, which will help them in the event that they are ready to begin to work so that they can apply for job opportunities and employment opportunities in the area where they've settled. Here are samples of some of these documents and what they look like. So the confirmation of permanent resident document looks like this. It is the document which affirms the permanent resident status of the newcomer and grants and guarantees their legal status in Canada as residents. Please make sure that the refugee or the newcomer keeps this document very safe, does not destroy it, because it is required in many, many situations, especially as they try to access various government services. The permanent resident card, which also acts as a proof of their legal status in Canada, can be used as a piece of ID by the newcomer upon arrival, and this will be mailed to them a few months after they've arrived in Canada. This is what the Ontario Health Insurance Plan card looks like, and you can obtain that also as well um, at the Service Ontario location, where you can take them to apply. For those in other provinces, you take them to your provincial service provider where they can process the health coverage plans, as well as also in the territories, they have that as well. The interim federal health plan or program from the federal government looks like this, which is issued at the airport. When using it, please call the number on the document, which provides additional information in terms of the services that are covered. You can check that in advance before you go to apply or to access the service that you are seeking the newcomer to receive by calling that number in advance. The social insurance number, as I said, is for work. It's a 9-digit number, which is provided once you take the newcomer to apply, and ensure that the social insurance number is protected. The newcomers should not share their social insurance number except for purposes of employment by sharing it with their employer, or if they are filing their taxes to Canada Revenue Agency, or if they are applying to open a bank account or in a credit union, as well also if they're applying for their Canada Child Benefits for the newcomers who have children, and also for newcomers who are planning to apply for student loans to attend either college or university, they will be asked to provide their social insurance number. So those are the only scenarios. Beyond that, we ask that you strongly inform the newcomers to not share their social insurance number with anyone, to avoid their identity being stolen. That ends our presentation, and I want to thank you for your time and also for your efforts as you prepare to receive your refugee families. We look forward to welcoming them when they arrive, and also to meeting them in person. I thank you.